At the Christmas party, while everyone was exchanging gifts, my father secretly sold my house to pay off my irresponsible sister's debts. When I walked into the living room, they were standing by the tree, smirking. "Now you've lost your house." I just smiled. "What's so funny?" they snapped. I looked at them and said, "The house you sold is actually not mine anymore. I sold it 6 weeks ago. You just defrauded your own buyer." But this didn't start at Christmas. It didn't start with the house either. It didn't start with the power of attorney or the home equity loan or the LLC that was supposed to buy my life out from under me. It started a long time before any of that. It started the way most things in my family started, quietly and at my expense. I need to tell you the full story, not the version where I walk in and drop a bomb and walk out looking cool. That part happened, and I'll get there. But if I just gave you that part, you'd think I was some kind of action hero, and I'm not. I'm a person who spent most of my adult life trying to be loved by people who only knew how to take. So let me back up, all the way back. I grew up in a mid-sized town in the Pacific Northwest, the kind of place where everybody knows your family name and what your dad does for work and whether your parents' marriage is good or bad. My father, James, ran a small property management company. He managed rental units, mostly older buildings, working-class tenants, nothing fancy, but it was steady. He drove a nice truck. He wore Carhartt jackets and called himself a self-made man, which was partially true and partially the story he told himself to feel better about the parts that weren't. My mother left when I was 9. I don't have a lot of anger about that anymore, but I want to be honest. She left because she couldn't take him. She told me that when I was old enough to hear it. She said, "Your father loves the idea of a family more than he loves the people in it." I didn't fully understand what that meant until I was an adult. When I was 9, I just understood that she was gone, and I was still there, and something had shifted in the house that would never shift back. After she left, it was Dad and me and Mara. Mara is my older sister. She was 11 when Mom left, which means she was old enough to remember more than me, and young enough to use it for the rest of her life. She learned early that if she cried hard enough, if she made her pain visible enough, Dad would move mountains. He felt guilty. He'd failed to hold the family together, and Mara was the most obvious casualty, so he compensated. Every want became a need. Every no became a yes if she pushed long enough. I was the other kind of kid. I was the one who didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, I was 9 years old and my mother had just left, but because I figured out very quickly that crying didn't get me anywhere. Nobody moved mountains for me, so I got quiet. I got capable. I learned how to do my own laundry at 10 and cook basic meals at 11 and manage my own homework without anyone asking. I didn't do these things because I was mature. I did them because I figured out that the only person who was reliably going to take care of me was me. My father noticed this the way fathers sometimes notice inconvenient things. He filed it away under not a problem and moved on. He poured his attention into Mara, who needed it and demanded it and rewarded him with adoration. He gave me the occasional head pat and told me I was so independent and meant it as a compliment. I took it as one for years before I understood it was actually an excuse. School was the thing that saved me, not dramatically. I just found out I was good at things, math, science, and pushing my body past what it wanted to do. I joined cross country in 8th grade because I needed something that was mine. I ran every morning in the rain when I was tired. By junior year, I was one of the top distance runners in the county, which meant nothing in the grand scheme of things, but meant everything to me at the time. A Coast Guard recruiter came to our high school my junior year. They showed footage of rescue swimmers, real footage, raw and shaky. People pulled from water in the middle of storms. The swimmers were steady, not performed calm, just the particular calm of people who had found the place where the world made sense. I signed up for the delayed entry program that spring. My father's reaction when I told him was not what I expected. I'd expected pride, maybe even a little awe. Instead, he put down his fork at the dinner table and looked at me like I'd said something confusing. "The Coast Guard," he said. "Yes, why not college? I got into state. I could do both eventually." He looked at Mara, who was picking at her food and not paying attention. Then he looked back at me. "Just make sure you keep in touch," he said, and that was it. Mara got a 3-minute speech when she got into a community college program for aesthetics. He cried. He actually cried. He said he was so proud of her, that she was going to do great things, that he couldn't believe how far she'd come. I left for basic training 6 weeks later. Nobody cried. A school for rescue swimmers is in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The attrition rate when I went through was around 50%. Not everyone who starts finishes, and I want to be clear, I did not cruise through it. I struggled. There were days in the pool where I thought my lungs were going to give out. Days in the gym where I couldn't feel my legs. Days in the classroom where the hydraulics and rescue rigging made 0 sense to me, and I had to stay up until midnight with my notes spread across the floor of the barracks trying to force it into my brain. I was not a natural. I was a grinder. I finished because I am constitutionally incapable of quitting something I've chosen to do, and because the alternative, calling my father and telling him I'd washed out, was genuinely more terrifying than anything they were putting me through. I finished A school on a Tuesday in October. I called home from a payphone outside the training facility. Dad answered on the 3rd ring. "I passed," I said. "Passed what? Rescue swimmer school?" I finished. There was a pause. "Oh, good. Good for you, honey." That was it. I stood at the payphone for a moment after I hung up, looking at the parking lot. Then I went back inside and celebrated with my classmates, who understood what finishing meant in a way that my father did not, and probably never would. My first station was in Oregon, Astoria. Small, foggy, cold most of the year. I loved the work in a way I had never loved anything. The missions, the mechanical precision, the physical demand that left no room for anything except the task at hand. Genuinely good at it. My supervisor said after my first live rescue that I had the composure of someone who'd been doing it for a decade. I was 23 and had never felt more like myself. The money started shortly after. better. Not in a dramatic way. It was incremental. The way erosion is incremental. You don't notice it day by day, but one morning you look up and the landscape has changed. It started with a phone call about 6 months into my first assignment. Dad's truck needed a transmission. He was short that month. Cash flow thing with the properties. Could I float him $800? I sent it. I was making decent money and I had low expenses on base. It felt like nothing. 3 months later, Mara needed first and last month's rent on an apartment. She'd gotten a job at a salon. She was really trying this time. Dad said, $500. I sent it. Then the salon job ended. Then there was a gap. And then an audition she needed to get to. And then headshots. And then a class. And every time the call came, my father's voice had that particular quality. Warm and slightly stressed. And implying that this was an exception. That this wasn't a pattern. That my family was not the kind of family that asked for money repeatedly. Even though by any objective measure that was exactly what we were. I sent it anyway. Every time. I kept paying because I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped. My father had a gift for reframing. Whoever crossed him became the villain, and he became the wounded patriarch. I'd seen him do it with other people. I didn't want to be next. By the time I'd been in the service 3 years, I had sent them somewhere around $22,000. I know because I went back and added it up later, in a lawyer's office looking at bank records, $600 a month on average, to people who never once asked how I was doing. There was one call that I think about more than the others. I was 25. I'd just come back from a multi-day search and rescue in rough water, the kind that ends with you wondering if the person you went out to find is going to make it. I was exhausted in the bone-deep way that's hard to describe if you haven't felt it. I sat on my bunk and called home because I needed to hear a familiar voice, and my father answered, and before I could say anything, he started in on a thing about Mara's car registration and some fee she couldn't cover, and could I send $200 before Friday? I said, Dad, I just got back from a bad mission. Can we talk about that first? He said, of course. Is everything okay? I said, we lost someone. The family was waiting on the dock. He made a sound, a sympathetic sound, and then he said, that's hard. Listen, the $200, do you think you can do it by Thursday instead? Friday's cutting it close. I sent the $200, and I sat on my bunk after I hung up, and I felt something I couldn't fully name at the time. It wasn't anger. It was more like realizing you've been looking at a painting for years, and you finally stepped back far enough to see that the whole thing is a forgery. But I didn't act on it. Not then. I filed it away. I kept working. I kept sending money. I was very good at enduring things. I bought the house when I was 27. I'd been saving since my second year in the service. I drove a car with 200,000 miles on it, and I ate on base as often as I could, and I put every bonus and every extra shift into an account I didn't tell my family about. It took me 4 years, but I got there. The house was small. It was a 2-bedroom Craftsman about 20 minutes from the base, with a covered porch and a fenced backyard and hardwood floors that creaked in the particular spot at the top of the stairs. The kitchen had one cabinet door that didn't close all the way, and a cracked tile near the stove that I always meant to fix and somehow never did. It smelled like old wood and cedar and something I couldn't identify but liked. I walked through it 3 times before I made an offer, and each time I walked through it, I felt the same thing. This is it. This is mine. Closing day was a Tuesday. My attorney Claire handed me the keys across a conference table and said, congratulations, homeowner. I drove to the house, unlocked the door, walked inside, and sat on the floor in the empty living room for about 40 minutes. I didn't have furniture yet. I had keys and a deed and the quietest I had felt in years. I didn't tell my father about the house for 2 weeks. Part of that was superstition. Part of it was something harder to name. An instinct, maybe, that said, keep this to yourself for a little while longer. Let it be yours first. When I finally told him, his reaction surprised me. He was warm about it. Genuinely warm, it seemed. He asked for pictures, which I sent. He said he was proud of me. He said he hoped to visit someday. I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe this was different. Maybe a house, something concrete, something that proved I wasn't just a cash source but a person building a real life, would change things. Mara called 2 days later. She'd seen the pictures Dad forwarded. She said, cute house. Must be nice to have all that military money. Must be nice, I said. She laughed like I'd agreed with her and changed the subject. That was the last time we had a conversation that felt remotely normal. The Bering Sea deployment came up about a year after I bought the house. I'd been moved to a cutter-based station, and the rotation included a 6-month stretch in Alaskan waters. It was not a glamorous assignment. The Bering Sea in autumn and winter is one of the more brutal environments on Earth. Cold that doesn't just touch the skin but gets into the structure of things, swells that move like hills, fog so thick you lose depth perception. The work is relentless, and the communication with home is limited, and the isolation is real. I wanted to go. I always wanted the hardest assignment available. It's a personality trait that has served me well professionally and probably cost me something personally, but that's a separate conversation. Before I left, I did all the practical things. I got my affairs in order. I had a will updated, which sounds dramatic, but is standard for anyone deploying to high-risk conditions. I put my bills on auto-pay. I set up a property manager for the house, a woman named Deb, who managed several properties in the area and came with a strong recommendation from a neighbor. Deb would handle anything routine, checking on the pipes, coordinating if any maintenance was needed, forwarding mail. And then there was the power of attorney. My lawyer Claire drew it up. It's a standard document for service members, a limited power of attorney that gives a designated person the ability to handle certain financial matters on your behalf in case of emergency. The key word is limited. It specified exactly what my father was and wasn't authorized to do. He could pay my bills if my autopay failed. He could authorize minor maintenance on the property. He could handle any urgent financial matter that required a physical signature, and where reaching me directly was impossible. He could not take out loans in my name. He could not sell the property. He could not use the authorization for his own benefit or for the benefit of any third party. Claire explained all of this when we went over the document. She was thorough. She always is. She said, "This is a tool for emergencies only. It doesn't give him general authority over your finances. It gives him a very narrow set of powers in a very narrow set of circumstances." I understood. I explained it to my father when I gave him the document. He nodded. He said, "I know, honey. I'm not going to do anything with it. It's just in case. Just in case." I gave Deb, the property manager, her own key and her own authorization to handle the house. She had a separate agreement in writing that was completely independent of the power of attorney. She knew the house. She knew what to look for. I said goodbye to the house on a Sunday morning in early September. I walked through the rooms one more time. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter. I stood in the doorway of the smaller bedroom, the one I'd been slowly turning into a reading room. There was a bookshelf and an armchair and a lamp with a warm bulb, and I'd found a small rug at an estate sale that fit perfectly. It was the nicest room I'd ever had, quiet and mine. I locked the door. I drove to the airport. I flew to Kodiak and boarded the cutter. I did not look back. You can't afford to look back when you're doing this kind of work. You have to be present or you get hurt. The first weeks in the Bering Sea were the adjustment, ship rhythms, cold, the constant low-grade exhaustion of being on call in rough conditions. We ran missions. We pulled people out of boats that shouldn't have been out in that weather. My closest friend out there was Reyes, Veronica Reyes, though nobody called her anything but Reyes since boot camp. El Paso, dry and precise in a way that made the long watches bearable. She'd been in longer than me and seen more, but never used it as leverage, just steady, the kind of person you want beside you when things go bad. We talked about our families sometimes. I told her about my father and Mara in general terms, enough that she knew the shape of things. She listened without making it a production. After about 6 weeks, I got a message from my property manager, Deb. She'd noticed a light on in the living room on a drive-by check that she hadn't been able to account for. She'd gone back 2 days later, and the light was off. Probably nothing. Timer malfunction, maybe. She was mentioning it because she'd agreed to mention anything out of the ordinary. I wrote back and told her to keep an eye on it. I didn't think much of it. I had other things to think about. 8 weeks in, the missions got heavier. We had a string of bad weather and 2 back-to-back rescues that pushed everyone to the edge. A crab boat with a compromised hull, 2 men in the water in 30-degree swells. We got them both. It cost something. It always costs something, but we got them. I slept for 12 hours after the second one and woke up feeling like my body was held together with duct tape and stubbornness. That was the week I stopped checking my phone as often. When you're depleted, you conserve. You don't have the emotional bandwidth for anything that isn't directly in front of you. It was a Thursday evening, 9 weeks into the deployment, when I was in the mess hall with a cup of coffee and a book I wasn't really reading. The ship was moving steadily, a low swell, almost gentle by Bering Sea standards. My phone was on the table next to my coffee mug, connected to the ship's satellite Wi-Fi, which was slow and unreliable but functional. I don't know why I opened Zillow. It wasn't a deliberate thing. It was the kind of absent-minded app tapping you do when your hands need something to do and your brain is somewhere else. I opened it and I typed in my address, my home address, the way I sometimes did to track the estimated value, watching it tick up and feel like something good was happening somewhere while I was out here in the cold. The page loaded slowly, the satellite connection buffered, and then the listing appeared, and my stomach dropped through the floor of the ship. There was my house, my blue front door, the covered porch, the fenced yard, all of it in photographs I had never taken, styled in a way I had never styled it, pillows I didn't own on the couch, a vase of flowers on the coffee table, the cracked tile near the stove carefully cropped out of the kitchen shot. Pending sale, the banner read. In red, I refreshed the page. The banner stayed. I looked at the listing price. It was $42,000 below what I'd paid, below what similar houses in the area had sold for in the past 6 months. It was priced for a fast sale, the kind of price you set when you need it gone quickly, before someone pays attention. The listing agent was a man named Garrett. I didn't know any Garrett. The buyer was listed as an LLC. 3 initials I didn't recognize followed by holdings. I sat very still for a moment. The ship creaked. Someone laughed in the galley behind me. The coffee in my mug was going cold. Then I went to find Reyes. She was in the equipment bay doing a post-check on her dry suit. She looked up when I came in, and something in my face made her stop what she was doing. "What happened?" she said. I handed her my phone. She looked at the screen. She read it. Then she looked up at me. "Your house," she said. "My house. You didn't list it." "I didn't list it." She handed the phone back to me. She said, "Call your attorney. Right now. Don't call your family first. Call your attorney." I went to the communications bay and got on the satellite line. It was 11 in the morning Pacific time. Claire picked up on the second ring. I told her what I was looking at. I gave her the address and the listing agent's name. I heard her keyboard moving in the background. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, I'm pulling county records. Give me a few minutes." I waited. The satellite line hissed. A technician came in to log something, looked at my face, and left quickly. Claire came back on. "There's a HELOC," she said. "A home equity line of credit. Opened 4.5 months ago." I didn't open any line of credit. It was opened using the power of attorney. Her voice was careful. She was choosing her words. "The signature on the application is your father's, acting as your authorized agent." "How much?" $112,000. I put my hand flat on the desk in front of me. It was a physical thing. I needed to feel something solid. "And the money," I said. "Transferred to a joint account," she said. "Held by your father and Amara Reynolds." "That's my sister." "I know." "Car lease on a Range Rover. Credit card payoffs across several accounts. A business registration for Northlight Creative, LLC, and 11 nights at a resort in Scottsdale." I said nothing. Claire said, "He's listing the house to pay off the HELOC before you come home and see the records. The lender gets their money, the HELOC disappears, and you come home to a sold house and a story about how they did you a favor. And the profit from the sale goes to the joint account, which they control. I sat with that for a moment, the full geometry of it, not just the money, the plan, the deliberateness of it. 4 months of planning while I was in the Bering Sea pulling people out of the water. When's the closing date? I said. December 26th. That's 5 weeks. Yes. Can you stop it? She was quiet for a moment. This is Idaho property, she said. There are steps we can take. But I need to know. What do you want to happen? I want to come home, I said. And I want to sell my house myself before that closing date so that there's nothing left for them to sell. She went quiet again. That's possible, she said. It would take moving quickly. I can move quickly. Okay, I'm going to start making calls. You need to get emergency leave. I know. I'll handle it. And she paused. Don't contact your father or your sister yet. Don't signal anything. If they know you're coming, they may try to accelerate the closing. I understand. I'll have the title company start a full search today. I'll have a buyer's agent reach out to cash buyers in the network. If we find the right buyer quickly, do it, I said. Whatever you need to do, do it. I hung up. I sat in the communications bay for a few minutes. Then I went to my commander's office. Commander Walsh was a compact, practical man from Minnesota who had been running cutter operations for longer than I'd been in the service. He had very little patience for drama and very high regard for direct communication, which is probably why we'd gotten along well. I knocked on his open door. Chief Hayes, he said. He looked up from whatever he was reading. I need emergency leave, sir, I said. Family emergency. He looked at me. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind it. He was reading the situation. How serious? He said. Serious enough that I need to leave as soon as the next flight out is available. He held my gaze for a moment. I didn't look away. He reached for his paperwork. What's the first leg? Anchorage, I said. I'll have the supply flight check the manifest. Might be able to get you on tomorrow morning. Thank you, sir. He was already writing. He didn't ask any more questions. The flight to Anchorage left at 6 in the morning. I told Reyes I was leaving. She hugged me once and said, burn it down if you need to. 4 hours to Anchorage. I spent it reading Claire's documents. She'd pulled everything. The HELOC application, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, the buyer. Northlight Holdings LLC was paying $318,000 for a house appraised at $360,000. A deliberate discount. The kind you give when you want it done fast, and the money was never yours anyway. Claire messaged me during the layover. Carter B., the registered agent for Northlight, was the business partner of Mara's boyfriend. The LLC had been registered 8 months ago. It was set up for this. The whole thing was a mechanism. Borrow against my house, move the money to their accounts, sell the house cheap to an inside buyer, pay off the loan at closing from the proceeds, split whatever was left, and I would come home to nothing. I sat in the Anchorage airport with terrible coffee and felt something I could only call exhaustion. Not at them, at myself. At the years I'd spent working very hard not to see what was always obvious. My father didn't love me. He loved what I could give him. And when that wasn't enough, he took more. I boarded the Seattle flight. Claire found a buyer in 4 days. Her name was Denise Hargrove, an investor who bought properties for cash, fixed them up, and resold. She was experienced, she was fast, and she didn't need financing, which meant no delays. She offered $338,000, $20,000 above the lowball price my father had accepted. I said yes. The closing process took 11 days. 11 days of paperwork and title searches, and the title company verifying that the listing my father had arranged had not actually transferred any ownership. The HELOC was a lien on the property, but it hadn't changed the ownership record. My name was still on the deed. The power of attorney had been used fraudulently, which meant its use was voidable, meaning Claire could argue that it hadn't created any valid legal obligation on my part. The title company agreed. They processed my sale. They paid off the HELOC from the proceeds. It was the only valid lien on the property, and the remaining balance came to me. After the HELOC payoff, after Claire's fees, after closing costs, I netted $214,000. I signed the final documents on a Tuesday afternoon in a title company office that smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. The closing agent slid the deed across the table, and I signed my name, and she notarized it. And that was it. The house was sold. My house. My name. My sale. The sale my father had arranged was still technically pending. His closing date was December 26. His buyer's $22,000 earnest money was sitting in the joint account he shared with Mara for a house that was no longer his to sell. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a family dispute. That's wire fraud. I called Claire from the parking lot after the closing. It's done, I said. Congratulations, she said. And then, I'm filing a fraud report with the county DA tomorrow morning. You should know that ahead of time. I know, I said. Do it. They're going to know something went wrong when the closing doesn't happen on the 26th. They're going to know before that. She paused. What are you planning? I'm going to the party. There was a silence. Then, be careful. I'm always careful, I said. It's my job. I drove to my old town on December 23rd. I checked into a motel 20 minutes outside of town. I spent the evening going through the documents one more time. Claire had organized everything into a digital folder. The HELOC application, the transfer records, the purchase contract, the registration of Northlight Holdings LLC, the connection between the registered agent and Mara's boyfriend. I made notes. I knew the timeline forward and backward. That night, I called my mother. We'd stayed loosely in touch over the years, but I hadn't told her any of this. I told her now. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You know this isn't about the house, right? He would have found another way eventually. The house was just the opportunity." I know, I said. "You don't owe him a confrontation," she said. "You can just let it run." I know, but I'm going to the party. She was quiet for a moment. Then, yes, I figured you would. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. December 24th, Christmas Eve. I went to Claire's office in the morning. She'd prepared a printed binder, organized, tabbed. We went through the legal landscape. The HELOC was fraud. The sale arrangement was wire fraud. And if the closing had gone through, it would have added deed fraud to the list. The DA's report had been filed that morning and acknowledged. Is there anything wrong with me going to the party tonight? I asked. Legally, no. You owned the house until 11 days ago. Practically, you don't have to do anything. I know. Just state facts, she said. Don't threaten. Don't characterize. Just what happened. Just facts. She handed me the binder. I drove to the old neighborhood at 8:30 in the evening. I hadn't been back since I'd left for deployment. The streets were the same. The houses had the same Christmas lights they'd had every year, some tasteful, some chaotic. One house at the end of the block that always went completely overboard, and this year had added an inflatable snowman that was taller than the garage. I turned onto my old street. The house was lit up like a stage set. Every window warm, music coming through faintly from inside. The driveway was full. A BMW I didn't recognize, my father's truck, a Range Rover that I assumed was the one the HELOC had leased for Mara. Street parking on both sides. There were people through the front window, shapes moving, glasses raised. They were celebrating. They were inside my house, celebrating. I sat in my rental car across the street for a minute. I wasn't composing myself. I was looking at the house one last time. The cracked tile in the kitchen, the reading room with the rug from the estate sale, the porch. It wasn't mine anymore. I'd sold it. That was right. I got out of the car. The cold air hit immediately. Pacific Northwest December. Not bitter like the Bering Sea, but sharp and damp. I was wearing jeans and a dark jacket. Nothing festive. I hadn't packed anything festive. I walked up the driveway. I still had my key. I unlocked the front door and walked in. The heat was the first thing. Then the smell. Wine and pine and somebody's expensive perfume. Then the music, which was a poppy Christmas playlist. Something with sleigh bells. Nobody noticed me immediately. There were maybe 20 people in the main room. Neighbors I recognized. Some faces I didn't. A cluster of women near the fireplace who had the particular quality of people who spend a lot of time on social media. Everything slightly posed, slightly performing. I assumed those were Mara's. And then Mara saw me. She was standing near the Christmas tree with a glass of white wine and the particular posture of someone who is enjoying being looked at. She was wearing a black dress, not a holiday dress, a dress for being noticed. Her hair was done. She looked like she'd spent several hours getting ready. She went very still when she saw me. And then my father turned around. He'd been talking to a man I didn't recognize, someone his age, someone prosperous looking. He turned and he saw me, and something moved across his face that I cataloged carefully. Surprise first, then a quick recalibration, and then the smile. The big one. The one that showed all his teeth. Aurora, he said. His voice landed across the room. People turned. He crossed to me with his arms out. The returning hero's welcome. He was performing for the room. Look how glad I am to see my daughter. Look what a family we are. I didn't move. I let him get close, and then I held my ground. He registered the stillness, the arms not going up to return the embrace, and he pivoted smoothly into a shoulder squeeze and turned us both toward the room. Everyone, he said. My daughter's home. She just got back from Alaska. 6 months on the water. He looked at me with the warm eyes he used when he wanted something. How are you feeling? You must be exhausted. I'm fine, I said. You look great. Doesn't she look great? A few people smiled. Someone said yes. My father steered me gently toward the center of the room. His hand was on my back. I let it stay there. Well, he said, now that you're here. He addressed the room again, raising his glass. We have some family news, don't we, Mara? Mara drifted closer. She was watching me with careful eyes. She didn't say anything. We've been handling some things while Aurora was deployed, my father continued. Estate management, you know how it is. And I'm happy to announce, he paused, let the beat land, that the house has been sold to a very good buyer, a fair price, and Aurora here can stop worrying about the upkeep from a distance. It all works out. He looked at me. Right, honey? Good news? The room was watching. Some people were smiling, the politely uncertain smiles of people who aren't quite sure if they're supposed to be happy for something or not. I looked at my father, and then I looked at Mara, and then I smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind that starts slow, at the corners, and doesn't quite reach the eyes. My father's brow furrowed. What? What's funny? I said. The house you sold is not mine anymore. I sold it 11 days ago. Whoever you arranged to buy it, they wired you earnest money for a property that had already transferred ownership. That's wire fraud. The room went quiet in a specific way. Not the quiet of surprise. The quiet of people holding their breath. My father's face did several things in quick succession. I watched all of them. Mara's wine glass went very still in her hand. That's... My father started. His voice had changed. The performance was cracking. That's not... You didn't... I opened my jacket and pulled out the folded document from my inside pocket. It was the closing statement. My attorney's name at the top. The property address, the sale date, the sale amount, my signature. I unfolded it and held it out. He didn't take it immediately. I waited. He took it. He read it. I watched his eyes move across the page. I watched them stop at the date. I watched them go back to the top. His hands were not steady. Mara stepped forward. She looked at the document over his arm. Then she looked at me. You're lying, she said. She said it with conviction, the way she'd said things her whole life, loud enough and sure enough that other people believed her. Claire filed a fraud report with the county DA this morning, I said. You'll likely hear from them in the new year. The buyer's attorney will probably be in touch sooner. This is... My father's voice came back, but it was different now. The warmth was completely gone. There was something ugly underneath it. This is a betrayal. This is my own daughter, standing in this house, accusing me of... I said, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm telling you what happened. You took out $112,000 against my house using a power of attorney that was not authorized for personal use. You transferred that money to your account and Mara's account and used it for personal expenses. Then you arranged to sell my house to cover the loan before I could come home and find out. I sold the house first, legally. The closing was 11 days ago. Several people in the room had set down their drinks. Someone near the back had taken a quiet step toward the door. You, my father pointed at me. His finger was shaking. You have no idea what I've done for you. Everything I've done for this family, you've done things for Mara, I said. For 20 years. That's not the same thing. Mara made a sound. It was a sharp, outraged sound. I looked at her. I said, the Range Rover lease, the credit card payoffs, the 11 days in Scottsdale, the LLC registration, all of it came from a loan taken against my house. A loan I didn't take out and didn't authorize. I want you to understand that clearly. She said, you can't prove any of that. I said, the bank records are already in the DA's file. The room had gone very still. My father was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face before. It wasn't anger. It was the look of someone who has run a play they were certain would work and is standing in front of the evidence that it didn't. I folded the closing statement and put it back in my pocket. Merry Christmas, I said. I turned around and walked to the front door. I opened it. I stepped out into the cold. I heard my father's voice behind me. Not words, just the sound of it, rising. I heard Mara say something. I heard a glass set down hard on a surface. I walked to my car. I got in. I started the engine. I drove to the motel, and I slept for 9 hours. Northlight Holdings lost their earnest money. They'd wired $22,000 to my father's account for a property that had already sold. Their attorney sent a demand letter on December 28th. Very precise, very angry. The county DA opened an inquiry in January. They were looking at the HELOC fraud and the wire fraud separately. My father hired a defense attorney. Mara hired her own, separate from his, which told me everything about how aligned they still were. She was positioning to argue beneficiary, not co-conspirator. My father's attorney called Claire twice. The second call included an offer. If I agreed not to cooperate with the investigation, my father would repay the HELOC amount. Claire conveyed it. I thought about it for 30 seconds. Then I said no. It was Reyes who put it best. When I called her from the motel parking lot the day after Christmas, I told her the whole thing. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, you know what gets me? He had the whole deployment to stop himself. 9 weeks before you found out. He had all that time to just be a normal father, and he didn't. I know. That's not a mistake, she said. A mistake is a moment. That's a choice. Every day. A choice. Yeah, I said. You okay? I'm okay. She believed me, I think, because she knew me well enough to know the difference between okay and fine. I went back to base after the new year. The deployment cycle continued. There was work, which I was grateful for. Work that required everything I had and left no room for anything else. The house, Denise Hargrove's house now, sold in the spring for $420,000. She'd done her work. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, the cracked tile fixed, the cabinet door replaced. I saw it on Zillow and felt nothing particular about it. No nostalgia, no ache. It was a house. It had been my house, and now it was someone else's, and that was just the way of things. I found my apartment in April. It was in a building 40 minutes from the base, on the 4th floor, with windows that looked east. It had good bones, solid walls, a kitchen with enough counter space, a bathroom with decent light, not a house, no yard, no porch, no cracked tile that was specifically mine, but it was mine in the way that mattered. Nobody else had a key. I bought a couch, not blue this time, gray, and a kitchen table with 2 chairs and a lamp I liked the shade of. I took my time. I didn't rush. I moved in on a Saturday with Reyes helping me carry boxes up 4 flights because the elevator was being serviced, and we ate pizza on the floor of the empty living room when we were done, and she said, it's a good place, Hayes. I thought so too. The DA's office moved on the case in the summer. My father was charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, a charge that applied given my deployment status, and wire fraud. Mara was charged with receiving stolen property. Northlight Holdings and its principals faced a civil suit from their own attorneys for the misrepresentation that had cost them the earnest money. I want to be precise about what I actually felt during this period, not triumphant. There is a version of this story where the wronged person feels clean satisfaction, and sometimes that's real. It wasn't what I felt. What I felt was something closer to grief, not grief for what I'd lost. The money was accounted for, the house was sold, the legal outcome was progressing, but grief for the thing that had never existed. The family I'd spent 20 years funding in the hope that it would turn into something that loved me. I had bought that hope over and over again, and I had never gotten it. My therapist, I started seeing one in February. A practical woman who worked primarily with veterans and first responders, said, you don't have to perform grief or perform relief. You can just feel what you actually feel. What I actually felt was a strange, clean emptiness, like a room after you've moved all the furniture out. Not barren, just clear. My father pleaded guilty in the fall to a reduced charge. His attorney had negotiated. The plea included restitution. He had to repay the HELOC amount, plus legal fees, plus a penalty. He was facing the remaining balance from Northlight's civil suit on top of that. He did not go to prison on the plea deal, but he was on probation for 3 years and had to sell one of his rental properties to cover the restitution. Mara's case was resolved separately. She agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced charge. The receiving stolen property charge was dropped to a civil liability finding. She had to repay her share of the transferred funds. I don't know the details of what that cost her in practical terms. I didn't ask. I have not spoken to either of them since I walked out of that Christmas party. My father's attorney sent a letter in December, almost exactly a year after the party, that included a personal note from my father. I read it. He said he was sorry. He said he hoped I could find it in my heart to reconnect eventually. He said he loved me. I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the FaceTime call after the bad rescue, when a man I'd failed to save was being loaded into a bag on the dock, and my father's most pressing concern was whether I could transfer $200 by Thursday. I put the letter in a drawer. I haven't answered it. I don't know if I will. Christmas this year was quiet. I didn't go home for the holidays. I don't have a home in that sense anymore. Not a family home, not a place where people who share my blood are waiting. What I have is an apartment on the 4th floor with windows that face east, and a couch that's the right color now, and a kitchen table where I eat my coffee coffee in the morning before work. Reyes flew out for the weekend. We cooked together and watched old movies, and she told me about a guy she'd been seeing who sounded genuinely good for her. And I told her about a training program I was trying to get approved for. And we talked about the work the way people who love their work talk about it, not complaining, not performing, just interested. On Christmas morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee, and I thought about the house. The reading room with the rug, the cracked tile, the porch. I thought about all the money I'd sent over the years, and the calls that never came unless something was needed. I thought about being 9 years old and learning to do my own laundry because nobody was going to do it for me. And I thought about the particular silence of my apartment, which is a different kind of silence than the one I grew up in. The silence in my childhood home was always full of things unsaid, of tension being managed, of affection being rationed. The silence in my apartment is just silence. It means nothing is wrong. I sat there with my coffee until it was gone. Then I washed the mug and put it away. Then I put on my jacket and went out to run. It was cold and gray, and a little bit of rain was coming in from the coast. I ran anyway. I'm good at running in weather that would stop other people. I always have been. I came back and unlocked my door. I hung my jacket up. I made another cup of coffee. Nobody has a key to this place but me. I think about that sometimes. What a strange and specific luxury it is to be the only person who can walk through your own door. Most people don't know to appreciate it. I appreciate it. Every single morning, I appreciate it.